So I enlisted in an administrative position. So I was doing logistics work, basically just getting supplies, ordering them, getting them to the right units, making sure they were issued correctly, had all the right equipment, et cetera, et cetera. So I didn't want to kill anybody. And then I went to boot camp and they train you to want to kill someone.
One of the things I wanted to ask you most about was school shootings. Do you think there's something unique about America to produce these things, or is it just the availability of guns that doesn't exist in other places?
If you want to be famous and you're a miserable person with no talent and no skill and everybody hates you, the fastest way to be famous instantaneously is to grab a firearm and kill a bunch of people.
Listen, Connor, thanks very much for taking the time and joining me. I appreciate it. Can you do me a favor for anyone who might know kind of you or what you do? Can you give us a bit of an idea of what you do now and your background leading up to it?
Yeah, so my name's Conor. I'm a science fiction, political, and philosophy nerd. A Marine Corps and law enforcement veteran is my normal introduction. I do centrist political debate. I try to, I sympathize with the right wing. I kind of identify as right wing, but then of course I have some left wing sympathies, and I try to be uh, as little racist and sexist and homophobic as I can be. But of course, everybody likes a good edgy joke every now and then. And So yeah, so I do two things. The main thing is Warhammer 40,000 reviews. I love the science fiction universe of Warhammer 40,000, so I break down their cinematics and their animations. But then the other thing I do is online debate, where I argue with other politically passionate people for money, time, and attention.
Okay, okay, very good. Okay? So you started off as a soldier. Was that your first job, like out of high school? Was it straight into it?
No, so it was my first job after high school, but I started working when I was 16. I worked in a car wash. I worked as a grocer, bag boy. I think I did another job somewhere in there. I think I sold vacuums, door to door salesman for a little bit. But then, yeah, at 18, I enlisted in the Marine Corps and I served for 4 years. And I went to Japan, Iraq, and then California.
Okay, okay. See, what was your motivation for going in? Was there any sense of oh, sorry, what was the year? Was the
Two,
US involved
2000,
in any?
yeah, so 2006 to 2010, and the motivation. I come from like a military family, so both my grandparents served. My grandpa on my mom's side flew. He was a navigator on the B-17 Flying Fortress bombers. So he was flying in Germany, and his most proud memories were basically picking up prisoners of war and flying them out of Germany back into England in order to, get them all fed and not starved and not executed and all that kind of stuff. So they were really happy to be flying home. So he helped do that. And then my father's father was a veteran of the Pacific Campaign. He was a CV, which is an engineer. So he helped build all the bases that were on the islands that helped the military invade Japan. So, and then I have an uncle who was an Army Ranger. So he's basically like Army Special Forces. And so it felt like a military tradition was in my family. And then when I was 13, I saw 9/11 happen on television. So I was like, yeah, I'm probably going to go in.
Okay, wow. So even from like 5 years earlier, the seed was in your mind.
Yeah. Yeah. Basically, I think for like military minded people in my generation, it was pretty much like our version of Pearl Harbor. Like you see something big happen where a whole bunch of people die that didn't deserve to die. And then you feel like you have to be part of the response.
I remember God, it was 9/11 was 2001, so I was eight. I was, yeah, I guess we were only 5 years older. Do you remember do you remember your thoughts at the time and that of people around you?
Yeah, so I was kind of always like a history nerd. So what happened was you have to bear in mind like the shock of seeing like a plane has crashed into the World Trade Center. So for most of the 90s, like America was like a really peaceful place. Like obviously we had like gangs and crime and all that kind of stuff. But as far as like war, like we hadn't had war in the United States for like 100 years. And that's even including like, Hawaii, like Pearl Harbor. It had been like 60 years since anybody had been killed on the mainland, unless it was like a really small terrorist attack. So basically, seeing the first plane come in, people thought it was an accident. They were like, you know, how did a jetliner fly into a building? There were literally people asking whether or not it was an accident. But then you saw the second one come in and hit the second building, and you're like, okay, this is intentional. It's an attack. So as soon as we knew that, I basically knew we were going to war. And there was like a lot of kids who like, they were like, why does anybody hate us enough to even do that? And that was kind of because we're 13, you know, we're not like geopolitical experts or anything.
I see. I see. In hindsight, not to say it was ever justified, but do you think it made sense based on any
Yeah.
past U.S. Foreign policy stuff?
Yeah, I read Osama bin Laden's little manifesto, and you know it makes sense. He resented, at least the one that I read. You know, and it's I think it's kind of a shame that we didn't publicize his motivations because I feel like it actually would have told us what was going to happen over the next 10 or 20 years. So his resentment was that the United States supported Israel when Israel was withdrawing from Lebanon, and the Israelis basically they supported a Christian militia in Lebanon that massacred like 3,000 Muslims, and Israel supported the massacre, and the United States supported Israel. So we kind of had blood on our hands for that. Then also we were called by the Saudi royal family when Iraq invaded Kuwait. We were called by you know, the Saudi family to protect the Ummah, to protect the Holy Land, and that was just like a total affront to have like these secular, degenerate, diabolical Christian in name only infidels protecting the Holy Land because the Middle East and North Africa was too politically weak to do it itself. They should have called on the holy warriors. They should have called on the Mujahideen. So it was just like a total insult to the Mujahideen who had been fighting in Afghanistan. So I think if you add that up along with like American interest in having hegemony or control of Middle Eastern and North African oil, then yeah, it all makes sense eventually.
Hmm. Okay, I see. Okay, so you join up. Did you go straight into the Marines? It's my understanding that the Marines are like a bit more of an elite unit than your standard
Yeah,
army.
they are, but they just teach you how to get your ass kicked really hard and you know ask for seconds. That's all it really is. So like you know everybody thinks that we can all do like ninja moves and we can all like snipe from like you know 1,000 yards away and all that kind of stuff. And the truth is like we are pretty good shots. Like we can make hits out to 500 yards with like a really basic rifle, and we do have better martial arts training than like basic not basic infantry, but basic soldiers. We're better trained than them. But the truth is that the Marines just teach you how to get your ass kicked. So, you know, that's the main draw.
Okay. You said it was Japan first, and then to the Middle East. How long in Japan?
A year and a half. And that was basically minimum security prison is the way that I like to describe it because American Marines don't know how to behave. So they get into fights, they get drunk, they you know they fist fight the local population, they have too much fun with ladies of the night and all that kind of stuff. So basically we were supposed to be home by midnight, but then the way that you don't get caught is the base doors open at 5 a.m. So instead of drinking until midnight and then rushing home at like 11:59, you just keep drinking until 5 a.m. and then you show up at 5:01 to the gate drunk out of your mind, and nobody asks any questions. So,
Okay. Okay. See. Okay. So I mean, like that being said, did you want to be in Japan for a year and a half? It kind of sounded like,
no,
yeah, it kind
it
of
was
sounded like,
miserable. Yeah, not my thing. Some people really like Japan. They really like the tropical atmosphere. They really like the people. They like the language. They like the culture. But Okinawa is kind of a backwater of Japan. Like a lot of people, a lot of like mainland Japanese kind of look down on the Okinawans as kind of like the way that most Americans would look down on Florida. So so it's you know it's Japan's Florida. So if you're into you know, Brazilian strippers and you know, Thai prostitutes and Filipino prostitutes and Japanese prostitutes and you know, very, very humid tropical weather and lots of alcohol, it can be a good time. But if you're not into those things, then it can get really tiresome really quick.
Okay. Okay. It sounded to me like, especially having seen 9/11, that you would have wanted to go to the Middle East and at least
Yeah.
and fight the with be
Well,
it Al Qaeda. Was Al Qaeda at the time, or am I thinking of someone
well,
else?
so no, it was this was before ISIS, but so it would have been like Al Qaeda in Iraq, but there were like a lot of different factions. And the truth is, I was raised by Christian pacifist parents. So my grandparents, you know, served in the military, but they were drafted. But my parents were like total hippies, like total pacifists. So they worked really hard and they got like white collar jobs and they made good money and all that kind of stuff. But on a personal moral ethics level, they really did not like killing at all and basically viewed it as like a last resort and all that kind of stuff. So I enlisted in an administrative position. So I was doing logistics work, basically just getting supplies, ordering them, getting them to the right units, making sure they were issued correctly, had all the right equipment, et cetera, et cetera. So I didn't want to kill anybody. And then I went to boot camp and they train you to want to kill someone. So basically there was like this conflict in my mind over whether or not I wanted to do more hardcore things or if the things that I was doing was already hardcore enough. And then I did get deployed. I did my job in a deployed setting. I had some interesting experiences, um, but not enough to make me want to re-enlist. So
Okay. Okay. I get you. Well, that's interesting that you said you went into the Marine training kind of not really that interested in being like a killer or anything like that, but they kind of instilled it in you, yeah.
oh, they're great at it. Yeah, it's actually really funny. Like I think of myself as a pretty smart guy, but they do brainwashing and it's so effective. You know you're being brainwashed and you don't care because like basically the process is so effective that it just makes sense. So like you wake up and you're waking up at like, you know, 5 in the morning, 4:45 in the morning, you make your bed, you clean up the area, you get outside, you pick up whatever trash is on the ground, you run out, you work out, you know, you run around screaming. And while you're screaming things like kill or blood and guts, or, you know, you sing songs about, you know, blowing people up or shooting people in the face or jumping out of airplanes or dying in combat. So everything that you talk about on a day-to-day basis has to do with killing and dying and loving the institution and all that kind of stuff. And then when you're going to lunch or you're going to dinner or whatever, you're not talking. You literally don't talk to anybody about anything ever. So the only words that are coming out of your mouth have to do with the culture and killing and all that kind of stuff. And then basically everything you learn is really interesting. And it's all about guns, how to break down guns, how to use weapons effectively, how to patch up your peers, how to do first aid, how to do emergency stuff, how to do hand-to-hand combat, how to use a knife, you know, like all that kind of stuff. So it's all about the mechanics of killing and surviving and being in a horrible environment. And as a result of that, your brain just totally gets acclimated to, I was put on this earth to be a part of this institution in order to serve this institutional purpose. And that's the way that you typically leave after 3 months of training.
Damn. How long is the training process?
It's 13 weeks, but then you have another 4 weeks of combat training if you're a person other than grunt. I think the grunts, I think they have another 8 to 10 weeks of training, so they specialize a lot harder. But then you also go to a school where you learn, like it relaxes a little bit, and you can go out, you can drink, you can hang out with people, you can socialize, you can talk, and you can buy cigarettes and alcohol and all that kind of stuff. But then you learn your job in the schoolhouse. And some people's schoolhouses are like a month, and some people's schoolhouses are like 2 years. And then you get trained in your job, and then you go do your job for 4 years. Or yeah, so my contract was 4 years.
Okay, is this process is it unique to the Marines, or is it like heavier when
I'd
training
say
Marines?
I'd say it's pretty unique to the Marines. You will still see similar patterns in military and paramilitary institutions. So like if you go to Army boot camp or Air Force boot camp, or if you go to the Coast Guard, if you go to whatever, you'll see copies of what the Marines do and all of that. But the Marines take it to 10 every single time. So like if you're talking about screaming, if you're talking about fighting, if you're talking about, shooting training, if you're talking about, assembling weapons, if you're talking about all that stuff, it's just the most extreme version of what it can be every single time.
Okay, I see. Do any movies get it right? I mean, the two that come to
Yes.
mind are Full Metal Jacket and Jarhead. I know Jarhead didn't. I think it didn't have that much training in the movie, but they're the two I can
No,
think of.
Full Metal Jacket, the first half of the movie that takes place in Paris Island, like in the training sequence or whatever, that is what I did. That is just what I did.
Really?
It's identical. Yes. So the drill instructor, Arlie Ermy, he was a little bit. I met Arlie Ermy too, but he was a little bit more hands on, where he's just like punching people left, right, and center, and gut punching people and all that kind of stuff. And for us, my generation, it still happened, but it was like really frowned upon. Like punching people in the face or punching people in the gut wasn't really your first, second, third, fourth, fifth option. It was like a option of last resort. And so it's really funny. And you kind of get used to it like after a while too. So the first day, sorry if I'm ranting, but this is some of my favorite shit to talk about.
No, you're fine.
The first day, they're ripping apart your equipment. So you get issued like thousands of items, like toothbrush, toothpaste, little hygiene kit, shorts, shirts, all this like random crap that you need for your training. And the first thing that they do is they bring you into the squad bay, and they start making you do an inventory of all your stuff, where you only have like 10 or 20 seconds to pull out the item that they're looking for. And while you're trying to pull out the item, they're kicking your shit, like not you, they're kicking your stuff all over the squad bay. So they're demanding that you find these items in under 20 seconds, but they're taking your bag and drop kicking it in front of your face, and it's exploding all over the place. And so basically, like, what's happening is people who are not used to stress, people who are not used to being yelled at or being under pressure, they start like crying, like tears of rage, like they're furious because they can't like fight the drill instructor or whatever, but they're also trying to accomplish a task, but that task is impossible and they don't have enough time to do it. So they just do that like over and over and over and over and over again. So one of the drill instructors was like charging across the bay, and he slipped on like a shaving kit and landed on his back. And one of the recruits laughed at him. So the drill instructor like stands up and he puts his hand like this and he goes, what? And he like hits him right in the throat. And the kid's like, ugh. So like, I get like, this is fucked up, but like, I was 19, so that was funny. So yeah, it happens.
Okay. There was another scene in Full Metal Jacket where there was that one guy, Private Pyle, who was kind of like dragging the rest of them down, and there was a sort of like a lateral enforcement, like the guys got
Yes.
together, and does that happen at all?
Yeah, of course. So we had a guy. One of them, his name was Engels, and then there was another guy. I want to say it was Joyner. I want to say it was Joyner. I literally I have like a book behind me that would have his name in it. But recruit Joyner, that was either my my guy in my police academy who wasn't doing good, or that was my Marine Academy guy who wasn't doing good. And yeah, like people beat him up, they talked shit to his face, they yelled at him, they screamed at him. He had a really bad time. But he survived and he got through it, and he didn't kill himself and he didn't kill anybody else. So that was good.
Okay, very good. Okay, so earlier on, we were talking about you do your year and a half in Japan, and then you went over to the Middle East. When you were over in Iraq, were you like engaging the enemy, so to speak, but were you like shooting and getting shot at?
No. So I went to a base called Al Assad, also known as Camp Cupcake. But it was one of the bigger bases there, and it was in the what's called the Sunni Triangle. And the Sunni Triangle was basically Western Iraq, and that was some of the most like violent places in Iraq. But it was kind of in the middle of nowhere, and there was only one town outside of it called al-Baghdadi, and it was basically like all the people who had tried to come in to like drop shells on this base, they had been like killed like over and over and over again. Like if you're a truck driving towards the base and then you try to shoot a mortar out of the back of your truck, you're getting hit by a helicopter almost immediately. So by the time I showed up, I think we got shelled like maybe once, and but besides that, we were just doing our job. Now I went in 2007. I think I went in like August 2007, and that was during the surge where George Bush actually committed more forces to get Iraq to try to stabilize because the country was just going to hell in a handbasket. And so what happened was the Iraqis basically realized that we weren't going to withdraw anytime soon, so they decided to chill out a little bit. And then just what would happen is we would send trucks out to do patrols and resupplies and all that kind of stuff. And one of those trucks would get blown up every now and then. And that's pretty much the way that it was at the time that I did it. Ambushes were pretty rare. Um, at least in my area of operations, it was mostly indirect fire and roadside bombs.
Okay. How did you feel about like the fact that you as an American soldier were there? Did you feel like you were doing something kind of worthwhile and good? Did you consider the people who were ambushing you to be like actually your enemies, or they're only doing it because we're here?
Yeah, so I've done a lot of study after the fact. At the time, you know, it's like a really simple calculus, which is I'm here with my boys, they're there with their boys, they're trying to kill me. If they try to kill me or try to kill my friends, I'm going to kill them. That's like the total moral calculus. And then the way that I and a lot of people conceptualized it is killing somebody was kind of like losing your virginity, right? It's doing something that is extreme, that is up there, that is experientially intense, that is you know, something that like people they think all sorts of things about it, but you don't really know it until you do it, that kind of thing. um so that's kind of like the thought processes at the time. Looking back on it, and I kept my virginity, I haven't killed anybody yet. But retrospectively looking back on it, the I do think that their response to us was rational, but I also think that what they did to each other was 10 times worse than what they did to US forces. So like we talk about like between 200,000 and like a million Iraqis died in the war in Iraq, right? And the truth is that that was not Americans. Like 90% of those casualties were not American soldiers killing people. It was literally Sunni and Shia militias just murdering the shit out of each other. And so what we really did is we broke apart the power structure that was in Iraq, which was not a great power structure. And then in the chaos, we created like a inter-ethnic civil war that probably killed between 300,000 and a million people. So, and we tried to stop the Civil War, but nobody was interested in stopping the Civil War. They wanted to see it through.
Hmm. So in hindsight, with all the the research and time to think of it, time to think about it, excuse me. Do you think that the US should have been had a presence in the Middle East?
Yeah. I think that it's not a moral thing, it's a material thing. So right now we are reliant on petroleum and petroleum products. And so when you're looking at Saudi Arabia or Kuwait or Iraq or Oman or the UAE or Libya, Venezuela, all those kinds of places, the reason why those are conflict zones and those are targets for America is because we're surrounded by petroleum. It's in our cars, it's in our plastics, it's in our computers, it's in all that kind of stuff. And whoever, you know, it's kind of like Dune, you know, the book series Dune. It's like he who controls the spice controls the world or whatever. That's what it is. So when you look at Western Europe or the West in general, or America, or commercial hegemony, or the economies of the world, who controls oil is not a trivial thing. So even if we're buying it, having people willing to sell it to you for a reasonable price is still incredibly important.
Okay. Do you think do you think that the US in particular being like the kind of global force that it is, the kind of mega power, do you think there is some kind of responsibility to play like world police in
Yeah,
some occasions, or at all?
yeah. I think as horrible as it is, and if my son asks me whether or not he should join, I'm going to give him like a really horrible geopolitical lesson that might make him not want to join. I think you have to know that, and I think that's part of the problem with like the morale and the morality of the American military in the early 21st century is we're telling them that they're fighting for American pie and truth, justice, in the American way, and they're fighting for their girlfriend at home, and they're fighting for their families and this, that, the other, but they're not fighting for any of that shit. What they're fighting for is global commercial empire. And so the thing is, like, typically that'll be like a leftist response where they're like, oh, you're fighting for global commercial empire, so you're being lied to, so you're just a pawn in this giant capitalist game. But then like the ultra giga chat IQ take is like, that's important, and some people have to fight for that in order for the world to work.
I see. And that kind of feeling of wanting to get out and do some shooting and do some killing that was kind of instilled in you. Did that fade over time?
Yeah,
Were you left like unsatisfied by the fact that you didn't end up doing it? Kind of like
yeah.
in Jarhead, actually.
No, yeah, it's no, that's a really good question. That's like one of the contradictions about getting somebody giving you the taste to like want to kill people, is that like when you don't do it, it feels like something's wrong. It feels like you're off because you didn't perform the function that you got trained to do. But what I would say is I took a couple of years off when I got back in from the military. I kind of reset mentally, and I realized I didn't do all the hardcore things that I wanted to do. And I didn't necessarily want to take anybody's life still, because I don't want to take somebody's life unless they're trying to take my life. Like if somebody was trying to take my life, I could justify that. Whereas if I was just killing somebody for shits and giggles, I don't think I could do that and live with myself. So I did 4 years of law enforcement, and in law enforcement, I dealt with violence. I fought people. I fought people on drugs. I did point my gun at some people. I pointed my guns at some dangerous people. I put them in handcuffs. I put them, behind bars. I put some people in prison for like 8 years at a time, which is a long time to be putting somebody away. I dealt with, murderers and rapists and thieves and drug dealers and shoplifters and all sorts of crazy shit. So I was able to satisfy that like aggressive monster side of me, but by using it in what I view as a relatively positive way.
Oh, interesting. So all the okay. Sorry. How long after leaving the military you go into the police?
Yeah,
Because
so
I'm just thinking of how long that feeling kind of lasted in you that you need to
yeah,
fulfill.
so I would say the animalistic, like aggressive feeling probably lasted for about 2 years. And then the lack of satisfaction from not doing something hardcore, that stuck with me, that never went away. And then I satisfied that urge through law enforcement.
Okay, I see. So yeah, you come out of the military. How long until you joined up, and when did the idea of being a cop kind of plant itself in your mind?
So it probably was 3 years after I got out of the military was when the idea planted in my head. And then it took me 5 years to get into law enforcement. So I got out in 2010. I got my 4 year degree. I knew I wanted to finish my 4 year degree before I became a police officer. So I finished my 4 year degree. I might be getting the timing wrong because I might have literally taken a college class or two while I was a cop. But I basically finished my 4 year degree and became a police officer around my 5th year. So I got my bachelor's and became a cop almost simultaneously. And I got out in February of 2010, and I think I joined law enforcement in like April of 2015. So it was almost exactly 5 years.
Okay, and what city what city were you a cop in?
Well, I don't want to make it too easy to find me. But it was in
Fair
Lake
enough.
County. Yeah, it was in Lake County, Florida. So it's northwest of Orlando. And I worked in a little commuter city that was basically like it was 15,000 people, but it was growing to be 45,000 people within a decade. And also it had like a lot of really cute events like a blueberry festival and a craft festival and all that kind of stuff. And so the city would be like normally it's 15,000, but on some weekends it would be like 200,000. So it just kind of depended on the weekend.
Okay, okay, I get you. Did kind of civic duty or like wanting to enforce the law or anything was that any part of your motivation for joining?
Yeah, yeah. I think that at the end of the day, the way that I view power is power abhors a vacuum. So in order for society to kind of function, there has to be some level of threat of enforcement of norms. In order to make sure that people don't steal, don't rob, don't kill, don't rape, don't murder, they have to be like slightly afraid of some level of consequence being imposed upon them if they commit those moral wrongs. So I do think that whatever utopian society that we're able to construct through perfect civic legislation and funding and social programs, at the end of the day, there will need to be some kind of human being with the authority to commit violence against other people, able to enforce social standards. And I was happy to fulfill that role.
Okay, okay. Given that you were a cop for 4 years, do you have the same level of faith in law enforcement and kind of in that
No.
idea? Please elaborate.
Yeah. So a lot of people a lot of people really dislike the system for punishing people too harshly, and I think there's a part of that where we spend too much time and energy and resources harassing people who are just like normal everyday people. As a matter of fact, like 95% of the population is perfectly fine. Like they might get drunk, they might drive a little bit fast, they might get into a fist fight every now and then and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, what they're doing is they're working a job, they're paying their bills, they're paying their taxes, they're trying to take care of their family, and they're trying to go home. That's 95 out of 100 people. And then I would say around 5 people, they're committing crimes. And then there's some people who have like an economic incentive to it where they've been introduced into crime as a career by their family. This is something that actually I saw, unfortunately, with some young men from the wrong side of the tracks. And so basically, despite being smart, despite having opportunity, despite a lot of opportunity, they could have been great members of society. But when they turned 10 or 11 years old, they were brought in by their parents and they were told, hey, school, that's not for you. That's for other kids. We need you on your weekends to sell weed on the street corner. And we need you to get with your 30-year-old uncle, and he's going to give you instructions on how to break into cars and break into houses in order to steal shit so we can sell it and make money. And this is how you make money for the family now. And we need you to do this in order to make ends meet. And so you have a 10-year-old or 12-year-old who starts participating in burglaries and selling drugs and all that kind of stuff. They're going to catch a felony sometime by the time they're 18 because it's really easy to commit a felony. Once they commit a felony, they don't have the ability to vote. They, lose. They're very difficult to employ, et cetera, et cetera. So then their options become continue to commit crime and deal drugs, or work at Taco Bell as a dishwasher. And so oftentimes, like a lot of people will, once they get a few friends killed or whatever, they'll go be a dishwasher at Taco Bell. But a lot of people will also continue to deal drugs and burglarize vehicles because they just don't feel like they have any other options, and society is closed to them. And it's good money for a little bit of it. If you don't get caught, it's great money.
I was going to say my perception is that when it comes to almost every type of crime, it's a very, very small percentage committing a huge outsized level of crime. Is that about right?
No, it's totally true. A lot of people, especially in the online political space, they talk about how 13% of the population commits 50% of the crime. So black people disproportionately commit violent crime. But when you're actually talking about, so I had a city of 15,000, I had a black population of 3,000. And out of that black population of 3,000, the amount of criminals that I was talking about who did what I just described was maybe like 200 to 300. And then the amount of murderers, like the people who like deal in high level drugs and kill people for that, was like 5. So you're talking about out of a population of 15,000, you're talking about like 5 people being responsible for all of the homicides.
Right. You actually mentioned there the kind of discourse among like online kind of political debates. What would you say, having law enforcement experience, what would you say is like the biggest misconception or misconceptions that get kind of thrown around that space about cops and shooting and so on?
like like that every cop is like wakes up every day and it's just their dream to like somebody over, like they're just like looking for an opportunity in order to get someone. And the truth is, like, there are cops like that, like out of 20 cops there might be one cop who like wakes up and they're like, yeah, let's get some tickets, let's get some arrests, let's do that. But like the truth is that like 19 other cops are looking at that guy and they're like, that guy's a asshole. And like all they want to do all they want to do is they want to get their traffic stops in so they can show that they're being productive. They want to respond to crime so they can write the reports and get all the paperwork in. And then if some serious shit goes down, they want, like, not all of them, but a healthy chunk of them want to respond to the serious shit in a serious way. So I would say it's like the rule of threes, or like thirds. A third of cops are the best human beings you'll ever meet. A third of cops are very mediocre, and a third of cops are total shitbags. And that's just which it should reflect any other job that you've ever participated in ever.
Okay, so especially given that you're policing in a state that's you know, it would be more towards it would be more towards like guns
Mhm.
almost everywhere, as opposed to one of these states where you can't conceal carry or open carry.
Mhm.
Did the training you do, or it did, excuse me, does it actually prepare you to go out and like police a society like that, or
No.
can you prepare someone at all? Even?
You definitely can. But I think that I was really lucky because I had the combination of the military and law enforcement, so I could switch gears really easily. Where if it was like a very calm situation, I could use my language and my body language and my communication skills and my conflict resolution skills and my emotional intelligence to resolve the situation. And then if it went violent, I did not. I don't think I pepper sprayed anybody the entire time I was a cop. I don't think I tased anybody the entire time I was a cop, despite making probably a few hundred arrests. Um, and That's because one, I was either able to talk them into the handcuffs, or two, I was able to wrestle them. And I do credit the Marine Corps more than law enforcement for that. When it comes to firearms, though, um, you can train somebody up to that standard, but you can't do it in the amount of time that law enforcement has to do it. Yeah.
Okay, okay, I get you. What was your reason for leaving after 4 years?
My wife and I started fighting about it a lot. Basically, I had my son, and when he first came out, I literally, like, I was like holding him, and I looked at my wife, and just like unconsciously I just blurted out, it's like, I need a new job. Like I literally said that. And The reason why I felt that way is because I loved being in law enforcement. It's a great job, but I didn't want to be like stepping in human brains at like, 5:30 a.m. on a night shift. And then I didn't want to be holding my son at 7 a.m. Like I couldn't break the worlds apart. And I didn't want how dirty that world is to impact the world that I care about a lot. So
Okay. Okay, I see. I get you. Switching topics a little bit, but not much. Most of my listeners would be from Ireland. Obviously a country where there's pretty much no gun ownership. I mean, even like the cop that pulls you over doesn't have a gun. You have to be like detective, or there's an special armed unit. I mean, some farmers might have like a shotgun, but like owning handguns for home defense, it's just not a thing at all. Could you maybe give like a brief kind of explanation of what the Second Amendment is, and how the gun laws in America?
so for the Second Amendment, basically, if you're if you're 18 in the United States, you can get a rifle or a shotgun. And in states that are pro-gun, you can basically own almost whatever you want. You can get semi-automatics, no problem, and then full automatics you can get if you're rich. But there's like a whole process to it. So just to explain that, semi-automatic, you insert a magazine, you pull the trigger, it goes off, it loads itself again, you pull the trigger again, the gun goes off almost as fast as you can pull the trigger. And when it comes to like rifles and shotguns, particularly in Florida, you can get pump action shotguns, you can get revolvers, you can get semi-automatic handguns, like Glocks are probably the most popular. And then for rifles, you can get AK-47s, you can get AR-15s, you can get whatever you want. And including like the weapons that are most often used in mass shootings, you can get those very casually. And actually, it's very normal for particularly conservatives to just have those as like a part of their collection in their home. Then, if when you turn 21, there is like you get like a federal background check, and then it takes like 3 days typically or whatever. And then once you're approved, you can pick up the weapon from a store, but you can also buy them privately. So if you go to like a parking lot or whatever, and somebody is selling something on gunbroker.com or something like that, you could literally just say, hey, I have $2,000. Let's meet at the Walmart parking lot. I'll buy a firearm from you or whatever. And you can buy whatever you want as long as you got the money. And that sale does not have to be tracked, and it's actually like very casual, very normal, very common. Then when you turn 21, you basically have access to handguns. I think is the difference between 18 and 21. 18, you can get the rifles and shotguns. 21, you can get the handguns. And then with the handguns, again, the world is your oyster. So if you want to get a high point, which is like $150 piece of plastic garbage, that you can just pull the trigger and like 1 out of 10 rounds will jam, but it still does its job. You can get that for like $150. And then if you want a Staccato 2011, which is a race gun that would be in John Wick, if you have $2,000, you could buy that as well. And then I would say 1 out of 10, 1 out of 20 people is legally carrying, and they just have a concealed pistol on their person. And then if you go into the wrong neighborhoods, you can get a pistol stuck in your face and people will carjack you. And that's just kind of like what happens every day.
Okay. Okay. My understanding is that the reason the Second Amendment is there is to protect against like a tyrannical government. It's for the private citizens to be able to defend themselves against a government and its army. Do you think um do you think that could like reasonably happen if a government went like fully tyrannical against the citizens? Would citizens having their own guns actually be any good? I mean, people kind of use the example of, oh, they could just send rockets or
Drones
bombs and
or
stuff.
fighter jets or nukes. Yeah. So no, this is actually a really important question. I actually had an old video that I need to do again, discussing this exactly. So what's really funny to me is I have a bunch of like progressives and leftists and Democrats like on the internet who have never served in the military and law enforcement, and they constantly tell conservatives that they could never defeat the military. And then I have a bunch of military friends and law enforcement friends who are like, "Oh yeah, you could easily defeat law enforcement and easily defeat the military." And the reason why is because, especially with the war on terror, like the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, we dealt with asymmetric warfare. And so we did not fight a national army. We fought people with small arms and roadside improvised explosives that they manufactured out of fertilizer. And those explosives were absolutely psychologically devastating. And so while there was never a toe-to-toe engagement that the United States lost in Iraq, Afghanistan, or Vietnam, Vietnam is an independent communist country. Afghanistan fell to the Taliban in 11 days after we left, and Iraq has still been in a civil war a decade after we left. And that's because the forces, oh, and by the way, it took the might of the entire international community to destroy ISIS, a breakaway, runaway jihadist state. And there's still people who fight not necessarily in the name of ISIS, but who still fight for the Sunni ethnic group and for like Wahhabist fundamentalist Islam in that region. So just because you can kill people doesn't mean that you can destroy their ideas or destroy their will to fight. Basically, 100 million Americans armed with firearms absolutely could take on a 1 to 2 million complex American military. And then also, just to wrap up the rant, you can't use all of the weapons that you want for this war without justifying the Second Amendment. So if you nuke an American city, then the country should be rebelling against you. If you're tracking the telecommunications of private citizens and then you're putting a missile through their front doorstep and killing them in front of their family, you should be getting taken out. So there's no way to fulfill the defeat of the insurgency without justifying the insurgency.
Okay. Do you think would you say that you like the Second Amendment? Was it a good idea?
Yeah, I think so. I think the way that it works is like America suffers mass shootings and gang murders and domestic violence murders. We suffer that, so the world always has one country of psychopaths with firearms who are willing to fight the wars that need to happen on the planet. So like, yeah, so we're writing the check for European freedom.
Okay. See, with that in mind, the reason for being able to own firearms, with that in mind, do you think there should be any kind of limitations, like up to like a heavy machine gun or a rocket launcher? Because if that's your reason, then the government
Yeah,
shouldn't be able to tell you what you can't use to potentially defend yourself against them in the future.
so I'm getting like a lot of people in my chat who are cheering me on, but I'm about to really, really, really disappoint them. So the Second Amendment reads, "A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed." So a well-regulated militia, well-regulated, when you look at the historical context, what they mean is a well-trained militia. If you look up at the definition of militia, there's two components. There's like the National Guard and the military forces and the reserve forces of the United States. And then it's like all males aged 18 to 45, and it's all women who enlisted in the National Guard. And there's two components of the militia, and this is all like defined by federal code. There's the regulated militia, which, like we said, is the military and all that kind of stuff, and the deregulated militia or whatever, which is the private citizenry. And so what that's really saying is that you have to have a body of military minded and trained people in order to maintain a free society. I think that's just true. Then the second clause is the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Well, the right of the people to keep and bear arms, so you're giving that to the people, not to the militia, which means that private arms should be used. Well, why should private arms be used? It's to train in order to be a good part of the militia. Well, guess what? I could train with a bolt action rifle. I could train with a revolver. I could train with a pump action shotgun. I don't need an AR-15 in order to learn fundamental marksman skills and fundamental room clearing techniques, and I don't even need it to be devastating. And also, you could have 100 million Americans with 10-round magazine pistols or revolvers or bolt action rifles, and they would still be able to take out the military. So, does it make sense to regulate grenade launchers, machine guns, tanks, airplanes, all that kind of stuff out of the picture? And so for me, I like the Florida balance where we still have access to all the cool stuff, but we don't, it's not banned, but it's also not like heavily encouraged. But I don't think I would go to war over an assault weapons ban either. Like if the Democrats passed it, I don't think I would join any kind of domestic insurgency against them.
Interesting. Actually, on what you said there, if that did happen, let's say um, like what you think of as like an assault rifle, like the AR or the AK, if those did get banned, excuse me, do you think the country would, or certain states at least, kind of would go to war over it?
I think they wouldn't comply, and then I think that it would come down to enforcement. So I think like a lot of red states, a lot of conservative states, they would just say, "Nah, we're going to do what we're going to do," and so they would probably stop the manufacture, but then all the old stuff would be out there, and then people would either not register them or they would register them. I wouldn't be surprised if the registered ones did get confiscated eventually, and then I wouldn't be surprised if they were just like millions of unregistered assault weapons, like quote unquote assault rifles, just floating out there. And they just got passed from family member to family member to family to member to family member. And local police officers, just as long as there was no crimes committed, they just didn't care. I think that that's probably what would happen. Somebody asked me an important question though. Christian Blair says, "Me either, but what about confiscation?" So if like Joe Biden and the Democrats, if they passed a law where they said all these classifications of firearms are banned, and not just that, but we're coming door to door in order to take them from you, yeah, that would be a problem.
Okay, okay. This is like purely speculative, and there's kind of no way of knowing. But do you think the fact that America has a Second Amendment and such an armed citizenry, do you think that has prevented some government have as the U.S. government from going
I,
tyrannical at some stage?
so it depends on what you mean by tyranny. So for instance, like I think the material conditions, right, from like a lefty analytical perspective. I don't think that we really had the ability to become like Pol Pot's Cambodia or Mao's China or Hitler's,
Soviet Russia.
yeah, so or Stalin's Russia. I don't think we've had like the historical conditions that would allow that to occur in the first place. So I don't think that we've prevented the American Hitler by having firearms. I don't think that's happened. But I do think that the Second Amendment in a really well-armed civilian population does necessarily put limits on the government when it comes to like the First Amendment or the Fourth Amendment, where it's like due process or freedom of speech or freedom of conscience. Because basically, like some of the shit that happens in like the UK or the Commonwealth or like Scotland, for instance, that shit will not happen in the United States. You will not see a person get fined or arrested for making like anti-Semitic jokes or hate speech online or anything. It's just not going to happen here because the implication is that like first they're going to come for your thoughts and then they're going to come for the guns or vice versa. And either way, with 100 million people with guns, it's just not going to go well for those kinds of people.
I see. I see. Do you foresee any actual assault rifle ban ever happening in your lifetime, let's say, in
Yeah,
the US?
I do actually. So what I see is I see Republicans continuing to not be responsive to massacres. I see us doing nothing about school security. I see us doing nothing about mental health. I see us doing nothing about the way our society is kind of falling apart. I see us doing nothing about the financial desperation and material desperation that people find themselves in these days. And then I think that we're just going to continue to slap a band-aid on it. And what we'll do is we'll have like emergency risk protection orders, like the red flag orders, where instead of like improving the lives of everyday Americans so they feel like they buy into their society and they love their country and they feel like they've gotten a fair shake and they're living the American dream. Instead, what we'll do is we'll allow enough people to be very desperate. And then when somebody is about to snap, we'll just send the cops to go arrest that person before they shoot up a place or after they shoot up a place. And we'll just keep slapping a band-aid on it over and over and over again. And I think in that kind of atmosphere, people eventually, rather than fixing the material conditions, they'll get sick of it and they'll say the guns. And I think that'll happen eventually.
Interesting. That was actually going to be one of my questions a bit later about school shooting, but I was going to ask you like
Mhm.
if heaven forbid like it started happening like I don't know like the big type ones like maybe maybe kind of once every 2 or 3 months, would it eventually?
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess the answer to that, yeah.
I think it will eventually. I think like when we have a year where there's like a Sandy Hook, like but there's like a Sandy Hook like every other month or whatever. I think a federal ban, if the Democrats were in control, I think a federal assault weapons ban could pass. Now it might be so watered down where it's like we're banning new manufacture and you can keep your old stuff. Like that's what I think would actually pass. But I still think that a watered down bill like that could eventually pass.
Okay. One of the main reasons for people owning a gun, particularly a handgun, is just the very logical want to protect your home, protect your family inside if someone breaks in. Do you
Mhm.
think that for like the average gun owner, not someone who's like especially trained or anything, for the average gun owner, do you think that having a gun actually does end up protecting you? I guess you're a cop. You've probably seen into them. But you have to be able to use. He has to be stored somewhere where you can get it when you hear the floorboard creak downstairs. Does it actually end up helping?
Yeah, so I think that it's always going to be situation dependent. I do think it makes criminals in America like a little bit more jumpy and actually does deter a certain amount of crime. Because like if you know that one out of three houses, one out of five houses or whatever, if you get in there, there's like a small chance that the owner is going to kill you, and not only that, the law is going to defend the law, like the owner or whatever. That's that your chances of like wanting to do that are going to be less, and you're going to be a lot more creepy, like sneaky, when you do that. So I wouldn't want like a disarmed population like the UK or Ireland or whatever, where basically burglars can kind of do what they want, and the law kind of sides with them half the time, where they're like, well, just lock the door and wait for them to steal your stuff and leave, and then maybe the cops will show up 20 minutes later to take a report. Like I can hate that shit. But anyways, so I think there's the deterrence factor. But I'm sympathetic to the argument that most people don't know what they're doing. We don't train people well enough to know what they're doing, and as a result, there's probably more people who hurt themselves or kill themselves than actually like solve crimes. But I still think it's something that we should have.
Okay, okay, I get you. Do you think there's anyone that should be any groups or types that should be excluded from owning firearms of any kind?
I want to make racist jokes, but I'll refrain from doing so. So like that no. I think if you're an American and you're of relative sound body, relative sound mind, you should be able to do it. And then I think that we probably need to focus more on like creating a community sense of mental health. So for instance, like one of the things that I would do, Westward Smile next week, we are doing. So I would love to create like I want to be a millionaire, right? I just want to be a millionaire eventually. I want my YouTube videos to explode. I want to look at the incoming ad revenue and laugh my ass off. I want my streams to, have a few hundred to a few thousand people watching them, and I want the super chat donos. Thank you to the people who have been donating. Thank you, Froggy Style. Thank you, Westward Smile. I just want that to be so much money that I'm just like laughing at it about the bank to the bank. But what I would like to do with that money, as an example, is like a community armory where, like if you're having like an off mental health day or week or month, your wife left you, your job left, you got fired, you're having a rough time, you're thinking about killing yourself, all that kind of stuff. Rather than selling your gun or getting rid of it, you can just turn it into a community armory for like $1 a month or $2 a month. We'll hold on to you, no question. We'll hold on to it for you, no questions asked. And when you need it back, we'll give it back to you. But it's here, right? So you have that sense of safety and security. But if you're having a rough time, you don't have that little temptation in the back of your mind, like everybody hates you, you're a piece of shit. Why don't you eat your own gun? And I think it's just like little community things like that where we could reach out to each other to try to help each other with mental health, but also give people avenues where they feel safe and secure and they're not scared to look for help. I think that could help with like suicide and domestic violence and all that kind of stuff.
One of the things I wanted to ask you most about was school shootings. As someone, I moved here in 2016, and like you know, in the 10 or so years before that, you know, every now and again you would hear about one of these horrible, you know, like the bigger types, like the Columbine,
Sandy Hook,
yeah, the Newtown, Connecticut, so on.
Parkland. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so do you think there's something unique about America to produce these things, or is it just the availability of guns that doesn't exist in other places?
So I think there is something unique. It's a combination of like our hyper ego driven culture, our industrial way of doing things, and the availability of firearms. So like availability of firearms, pretty much everybody has access to guns, or they know somebody who has a gun. So basically, if you're mentally unwell, you want to hurt other people, you can find a firearm probably if you think long and hard enough about it. Then when it comes to like our ego driven culture, we kind of have something where like you have to be important, you have to be a name, you have to be a face, you have to be popular, you have to write a best-selling book, you have to be in a movie, yeah, you have to do something cool with your life, you have to have a cool job, cool wife, cool car. And so a lot of people fail that standard, and they don't feel like they have any importance, and and then the industrial side of things, we have like a very industrial educational system where everybody's just a face and a number. And you know, some of these schools, I mean, I went to a school where like each grade was 3,000 kids, each classroom had 30 or 40 students. So when you have 30 or 40 students, you're not getting one-on-one time with the teacher. They're basically presenting information. You might take notes, you might turn in your homework and your tests, and then you get a grade and you move on. So I think with that lack of like social connection, um, if you want to be famous and you're a miserable person with no talent and no skill and everybody hates you, the fastest way to be famous instantaneously is to grab a firearm and kill a bunch of people. And then everybody will read your manifesto. Your name will be spoken about 50 years from now. And it's easy to do. So,
I, I
yeah.
I've heard an example being like on what you're saying about like John Lennon or Mark Chapman. You can become a name by achieving and creating and so on, or you can just kind of chop someone down or do
Yeah.
something terrible.
It's a perfect example, but you know, John Lennon wrote Imagine, so I have mixed feelings about that.
That's funny. Fair enough. Fair enough. What was I gonna say? Oh, okay, yeah. So you mentioned about um maybe the want for notoriety as being a motivation for these shooters. Do you think it
Yeah.
is for most of them?
Yeah. Absolutely. Like nobody likes them, nobody cares about them. They're not particularly talented. They don't know how to get their genius shown to the world. You know, they feel like they were owed more in life than they were, and as a result, it's everybody else's fault for why their lives suck and why nobody likes them and all that kind of stuff. So let me go ahead and lash out. And you know, I think like a lot of these things could be solved by, you know, good friends, good communities, all that kind of stuff. Not 100% of them, but I do think a lot of this could have been solved by good friends and good communities.
Okay. With that in mind, do you think that media has a responsibility to maybe kind of minimize that? I think a lot of some companies have like a policy of not naming, not showing photographs. Would you agree with that? Is that something they should do?
Yeah, yeah, I really would. I think that it shouldn't be banned, but it should be like a time, like a time limit where it's like 1 year or something like that. And I think they should like release like the generic information, like, you know, white male, 35, disgruntled about personal relationships, used to go to the school or something like that. And that should be like the total brief. So you're not actually giving their manifesto, you're not giving out their name, you're not making them famous, you're not making them interesting. And then like a year later, you could just kind of like quietly release the information. And then that way you're robbing some of the fame and notoriety out of this like fantasy of being a renowned mass murderer.
Interesting. Yeah, my next question was going to be about manifestos. Do you think they should go into like anything at all from them? Should you try to
Maybe.
glean like
Yeah,
motivation?
I think you should do like the general thing where it's like if they're a jihadist, say they're a jihadist. If they're an incel, say they're an incel. If they're a whatever, say they're a whatever. But then don't give out like the specific parts of the manifesto that actually like show their grievances. Because what these people want is they want their manifestos to be read, and they're using the mass murder as a vehicle to gain notoriety and get attention for people to read. So I think you should deny them that, and then basically maybe release it quietly like 12 months later for some kind of thing. Oh yeah, so roll of the D, and like roll of the D says all manifestos should be burned live on television without ever being read. I would be like in a totalitarian state that I was running, I would be okay with that. But in a totalitarian state, I would also like draw and quarter mass shooters and terrorists on twitch.tv. So you know that's my thing.
Okay, okay, fair enough. Do you think even for like, I mean, it could be streamer, but it could be like criminologists as well. Do you think these manifestos are generally worth examining, even from in the
Yeah,
way that like it's important to read like Mein Kampf, you know, that kind of
yeah,
way, like.
yeah. I think there's like a historical and criminological and psychological analytical value to it. But I think that should borderline be like left to like criminologists and educators and all that kind of stuff. And also, if they identified the formula, let's say that like we collect all the manifestos of every mass shooter and terrorist ever, and we identify the formula of the manifesto, at what point do you have enough information to say, you know, here's their grievance, here's their motivation, here's their psych profile, here's their relationship with their family, here's this, and this variable that seems important to it. At what point do you just say, we have enough information, we don't even need to study this anymore, you know? So I don't know if there's a real answer to that question, but I'm just saying, like, if you read 30 manifestos and they all have the same formula, despite being for different grievances, you know, how much more do you need to study?
Okay, okay, I gotcha. Assuming you don't think that like an assault rifles ban is the way to go to prevent like these semi-regular kind of mass shootings or school shootings, what is the what is the solution to prevent or minimize in your mind?
Well, yeah, unfortunately, it's going to be like a 10-step thing where I think there probably is like a utilitarian calculation to the way society should be run. I don't think that like some societies should be like collectivist, communist, and some societies should be, you know, like anarcho capitalist, individualist. I think that there probably is a correct way to run a society. Now, I think that people should be able to opt out of society. So, for instance, if you want to say, I want to pay $0 in taxes, but I will consume zero public resources. And I'm going to go live on this farm and I'll pay my property tax. But besides that, I'm going to get my own water, my own food, my own sunshine, all that kind of stuff, and everything else I'm going to buy privately. I think that people should have the right to do that. So if they want to go build like a commune out in Montana or Nebraska, they can do that. But for the rest of us, the people who live in the cities, who participate with the US federal government and state governments and all that kind of stuff, I think there is probably a dialed in formula for the best society you could create. And so I think that like early childhood education availability should be universal. So you don't have kids who are starting like decades behind their peers as soon as they hit kindergarten. I think that school should be high quality, and that should also be universal as well. So if people still want to spend $50,000 a year on private education, they can do so, but the public schools will be properly funded, properly staffed, properly educated. And then I think that those things need to be tiered as well. So it's not a one size fits all. So if you're an idiot who just needs a high school degree so you can go get a job and, you know, flip burgers or whatever, we will get you that high school diploma. And then if you're the next Einstein, we'll get you an international baccalaureate or an advanced placement degree so you can attend the world's finest universities. And then there needs to be something in between just for people who are in between. So basically, like, it needs to be tiered, and then 0 to 18 or even 0 to 22, you need to be able to go through the education system and then earn an opportunity. And then my last thing would be, I think that I was really privileged because I joined the military and I got the GI Bill. I think that without a living stipend, there should be an equivalent to the GI Bill where you just get like 2 to 4 years at a higher education that would be vocational free. So if you want to be a pipe fitter or a plumber or a welder or an engineer or a doctor or a lawyer, the pricing will not be what prohibits you from getting into a lucrative position that could contribute to the economy properly. And then I think it's just about creating an economy where people actually feel like they're earning living wages and having a good sense of community. I finally, this is a centrist fascism platform hour. I would ban the minimum wage. I wouldn't have a minimum wage, but I would bring back unions. So I think that like every collective like wage earner should be able to negotiate their salaries with their institutions. And then also I think that like private companies under a certain thing, like let's say that you're opening up like a coffee shop and there's only 5 people that work there. If they want to make $4 an hour plus commission with no benefits in order to help you build your dream, they should be allowed to voluntarily do that. But if they want to say, fuck you, I don't want to help you realize your entrepreneurial dream, I need $15 an hour in medical, vision, and dental, then they should be able to negotiate that.
Okay, so what you named there, the things that you went through, they sound to me like they sound to me like things that would prevent like a potential school shooter from kind of being formed, you know. So let's just say that there'll be a few anyway who kind of slip through the cracks. In terms of security, I mean, a lot of people would say, listen, if you want to prevent school shootings, or at least the really really bad ones, banning assault rifles. So let's say a kid does kind of slip through the net, and they decide they want to do that, and they get
like
the gun.
fuck it. Like, fuck it. I don't like all this free education and good food. I want to kill all my friends. What a fucking asshole. All right. Anyways, so in the hypothetical where we still have those asshole kids, which by the way, that is the real world. In this scenario, what I would say is you have to make schools, particularly public schools and private schools, for 0 to 18. You have to make those hard targets. During the school hours, during days of operation, there needs to be single point entry. Basically meaning that in order to get access to the school from the exterior, there's only one way in, there's basically only one way in. When it comes to lockdown, buildings need to be able to be locked down. That way, if there's gunshots or whatever, all the doors are locked, everything's closed down. And on top of that, the doors are difficult to get through. That way, a shooter can't just go from room to room to room to room, massacring people. When it comes to like the training for faculty and staff, I think you need to do age appropriate run, hide, fight. So basically, let's say that the school is locked down or the institution is locked down. Run. If you can run, right? Get out of there. You're in the parking lot. You hear a whole bunch of gunshots. Jump in your car, off, or start running in the opposite direction. Hide. A majority of the buildings that are going to get locked down. I just saw a technology where like basically you can like fold out from the corner of a room like a bulletproof shelter, and it only takes 10 seconds to deploy. I would literally say either upgrade all of the closets to fit all of the students. God forbid there's a shooting, and have like bullet resistant, entry resistant doors, or have one of those in the room. That way, within 10 to 20 seconds, you can have all the kids in a bullet resistant structure within like 20 seconds. So that solves everything except for the first classroom, right? And then with the first classroom, what can happen is let's say somebody just decides to hide a handgun and a bunch of magazines inside a backpack. That would be the only way to pull off a mass shooting at this point. Then at that point, especially if it's age appropriate, if it's middle school or if it's high school, then you basically need to treat fight. Where with fight, somebody pulls out a gun and they start shooting everybody else. If you don't feel like you want to fight, let's say you're girly, you're effeminate, you don't like violence, you don't want to think about it, all that kind of stuff, you can opt out of the fighting training. But if you're a boy or a man, or you're masculine, or you're an administrator, or you're a butch lesbian gym teacher or something like that, you can enlist in the fighting portion of the training. And the fight portion of the training will be like basic martial arts, basic teamwork, basic communication. And then at that point, if you're like a mass shooter who wants to bring a pistol to class, you're not getting a rifle through because there's only single point entry and there's law enforcement already there. you know that you're only going to be able to fuck up one room with a pistol, because basically the entire school will be locked down instantaneously as soon as there's gunfire, and all the other classrooms will be locked down with all the students hidden behind bullet-resistant shit. And then you know that if you pull a pistol out in your class, there's like a 50% chance that everyone in that room is going to kick you to death before you even shoot the person that you want to shoot. So like at that point, it goes from a soft target with a lot of vulnerable people that you can do a horrific crime to in order to gain fame and infamy, to an improbable scenario where basically there's a 50-50 shot that you're going to pull a deadly weapon and get your dick kicked in through your fucking mouth. So then I think at that point, it'll still happen, but it'll be rare and it'll be very low casualties.
Okay. You would put you would have like actual law enforcement or like a security guy for the school.
Yeah, I would say whatever's appropriate by state. You could parochialize this. So for instance, and by parochialize, I just mean you could regionalize it. In Florida, we have something called the Guardian Program, which actually isn't as stupid as it sounds. What that means is by state requirement, there is one armed person per 1,000 students, and it's either a law enforcement member or it's a guardian who is a non-instructional school personnel. So they are not with students. So they're not keeping their revolver in the classroom pointed at their students waiting for something to go off. Okay. It's just like an administrative dean or a like a disciplinary dean or a janitor or something like that. And they train on a concealed weapons course, and they have like specific, they're working on this, but they're working on like a specific uniform so they don't get shot by the cops. But they're basically trained to, before all the other cops can come, they're trained to meet with the SRO or SROs, because there's now one per 1,000 students, and just go. So just respond immediately. So I think that's a good model, because not every school can afford multiple police officers, but every school could afford to send their deans to a concealed weapons class and have them work as a team.
Okay. So one of the recent one was in Tennessee, I believe. The one before that was Uvalde, Texas. Two very, very different responses by law enforcement after the Uvalde thing. That became like a story in itself. There was like footage. There was footage of them kind of waiting around. One of them like hand sanitizing. It's really easy for me to with like a normal kind of safe job to kind of criticize and say what they shouldn't have done. To be fair, you're a cop, so I think, or a former cop, so I think you are in that position. Can you talk to me about those two responses?
Yeah. So what ended up happening was, despite having active shooter training in Uvalde, they used command as a excuse to not do their job. So one mid-level or high-level supervisor said, no, I need to know what happens before you guys make a decision. Talk to me. And they used that as an excuse to not do what they were trained to do. Modern mass shooting training, it is parochialized, it is regionalized. So it's entirely possible that they had like out of date or shitty training, but it's pretty much known at this point that you don't wait for backup. You don't wait for SWAT. You don't wait to have enough guys. If you have two people and you both have rifles, you go in and you do it, because the guy's alone. And on top of that, bleeding is important to respond to in a timely manner. So part of the reason why Uvalde was so bad, and it was like 30 kids or whatever, is because that guy was left in the room by himself. They stood outside the door for like 40 minutes or like an hour or some shit before they responded. So anybody who was wounded bled out. That's just the truth. So there were probably a few kids who were like in shock or shot or had like leg wounds or whatever. They probably bled to death because of the lack of action. So that versus Chattanooga or Nashville or whatever the fuck it was. Chattanooga or Nashville is textbook what the training says to do, which it doesn't matter if it's 4 of you or 2 of you, you're just going. And the cool thing about, if you look at the 2 videos, in Uvalde, they're using each other as excuses not to go in. where one of the guys was like, this, we should go. And then everybody else is like, no, like, wait. And then that guy backs down because he has 4 or 5 people telling him to wait. Whereas in the other situation, you can actually hear one guy, I forget his name is, but somebody was talking about in the comment section, and they were like, he was pushing everybody the entire time, where he's like, clear here, moving here, clear here, moving here, which, by the way, that's not necessarily good tactics. You shouldn't be announcing where you are and what's clear, because you're giving the shooter like a heads up that you're on the way. They can probably hear you, but at the same time, what he is doing is he's psyching everybody up around him that they're not going to wait. They're going to keep moving. So if you basically this is my advice to any law enforcement people or anybody who's friends with law enforcement. If the choice is shut the fuck up, then shut the fuck up. Be quiet. Just move the way you need to move in order to do the job. But if nobody's moving because they're freaking out and they're pussing out, then be as loud and aggressive as you need to be to get everybody moving in the same direction.
Could a cop, I know that, to be fair, like okay, a cop can go after someone, go shoot someone, but then afterwards they could be in a world of shit because maybe they didn't respect like chain of command or something like that.
Yeah, fuck that. There's something called good faith doctrine, and I was probably a little bit too loose as a law enforcement officer myself. But basically, if you're responding to a crime and you do your job within the purviews of your job to the best of your ability as you understand it, that is a legal defense against Monday morning quarterbacking. And if you're the kind of person who's not doing the job the way that you need to do the job, the way that you think it needs to be done because somebody is going to Monday morning quarterback you, then get out of the fucking job because you shouldn't be there in the first place.
Actually, on what you just said, do you think like everyone who does sign up to be a cop, do you think that running into a school that has, I mean, possibly like 1 or 2 shooters inside, risking your own life to take them down, should that be something that you're signing up for?
Yeah, absolutely. Because the thing about it is, you don't pick the day, and you don't pick the incident. So the job of law enforcement has all kinds of people who do it because it does take all kinds of people to do law enforcement. So we have female cops, we have overweight cops that are really smart, we have people who are good at paperwork, we have people who are good at fitness, we have people who are good at firearms, and like no individual, there are a few cops who are good at everything, but those guys are rare. Oftentimes people are like incredibly emotionally intelligent but very book stupid, or very book smart but emotionally unintelligent, or they're good at firearms and martial arts but they're not good at talking to people. But altogether, like you can form through a team, you can form like the cumulative excellent law enforcement officer. But the truth is that if you're not strong in firearms or fitness, you should know that that's one of your weak points, and you should know that it could still be you who is the first responder. And particularly if you're like a school resource officer, that has to be part of the job. Part of the job qualification for a school resource officer should be responding to a shooting, period. Like, end of story.
Okay, going back a little bit to the proposed like training for students that you said should take place. Do you think, I mean, this would probably be more for younger students, but do you think that going through like drills and talking to kids about like the possibility of someone coming in and butchering them, and like drilling for it as if it's like a very real scenario, do you think that would have some kind of like, maybe not like traumatic, but like psychological effect on kids?
Potentially, but I think it's worth the I think it's worth that. And then I also think you can do it age appropriate, and you don't have to freak them out about it. Because like most kids, especially boys, I'm being sexist, but whatever. They understand like the world of cops and robbers and good guys and bad guys and superheroes and all that kind of stuff. So you don't have to use language like, hey, 5-year-old Timmy, there's a chance that, Abdul Raham Nassim is going to come kill you in the name of ISIS, or Chet, Chet Whiteley, the fucking local schizophrenic, is going to come butcher you, and you're fucking like, you don't have to be that specific, and he's going to shoot you in the face with a machine gun. Like, you don't need to fucking describe that shit, but you can just say, hey, guys, love you. You're my favorite students in the entire world. We need to make sure that you're safe. In order to make sure that you're safe, sometimes there could be a bad guy, or we could be scared that there's a bad guy on the school. And we need to make sure that you guys are safe and you know what to do if that happens. So what we're going to do, we're doing a drill today. It'll last about, 15 minutes or 20 minutes. What we're going to do is we're going to go into this closet. We're going to lock the door. We're going to lock all the doors. We're going to turn off all the lights. We're going to put the curtains down. We're going to jump into this closet. We're going to turn it off, and we're going to play a quiet game, and we're going to be as quiet as we can for 10 to 15 minutes, and then after that, we're going to go back to class. And boom, you just did run and hide, which is appropriate for elementary school. And then at middle school, like I said, middle school and high school, I think that's where you introduce the fight component because they're getting older, and then you make the fight component voluntary.
Okay, gotcha. Another shooting that occurred while I was here, and it stands out in my mind a lot, was the one in Vegas. It wasn't a school, but it was a guy
Outdoor concert, yeah.
Yeah, he basically assembled like an arsenal of weapons. Had a really like good vantage point and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think that in a society where it is legal to possess these kinds of guns, is this just something that's kind of like a risk that you have to live with, in the
Yep.
sense that, like, if you have roads, you just have to live with the fact that someone can drive their car off the road into people?
Yep.
Is
You kind of got to think about it like a fire or a tornado or a hurricane or something like that. It's a force of nature. And like I do get like other places are like, what the fuck? Like why do you have to deal with this force of nature? It's only voluntary because you have firearms. But like it's the choice that the people of the United States of America have made voluntarily for at least, I don't know, 300, 400 years now. So yeah.
I see. Do you think it's a good? I've always thought it's a very good setup that in America, you can choose to live in a state where people can walk around with like any kind of gun publicly, or you can live in like the New Yorks where that's not a thing at all. Do you think that is a good system, having state by state
Yeah.
different?
Yeah, make it voluntary. Because the truth is that there's good and bad to both. I was joking with my mom and my wife because we were driving up to New York to visit friends, and we were driving up to Boston to visit some friends, and the traffic was so fucking bad going through like New York City. And I was like, I get it why nobody has a fucking gun, because I would have killed like 6 people already. Like, because it's so congested. There's so many people driving and acting like assholes. Um, so yeah, like I get it, but I think that should be voluntary. So basically, if you want to live in a blue city where they have really strict requirements for permits and all that kind of shit, you can go do that. And if you want to own an AR-15 in Kentucky, then you should be able to own an AR-15 in Kentucky. So yeah.
Just one last thing on the school shootings topic. Do you think um that to some degree, like, it's a trend that's kind of here to stay? Do you think like 10, 20 years in the future, it just won't be done as much, that there won't be that same kind of appeal that you were talking about?
We might, it's so fucked up to say, but we like school shootings might literally be cringe in like 10 years. We're like oh yeah, there was like the thousands and tens, those were some of the greatest mass shootings of all time. But trying to do it now, it just feels so derivative. You're not even being creative anymore as a
It's
mass
so
murderer.
cliche.
Yeah, it's so cliche. Like, oh, another person who wants to be a mass shooter, cringe. Like, and honestly, like that's that'd be kind of funny. Like if we, because I know, Pete, you're not supposed to use gay as like a term to describe as like lame or whatever, but wouldn't that be like kind of like funny if like we were just like passively like, oh, that's lame, like to like mass shooters or whatever, like, oh, cringe. And like, so, and as a result, they didn't get the social credit or the shock that they were looking for, and as a result it became less appealing. So that like I do think that's like actually possible, where it just becomes like a weather event, so we don't even care. So then people, mass shooters, consider it less because they know that nobody's going to care about it. So then maybe it'll pass out of our Jonah boy, what the sorry, somebody in my comments said a mass sexual assault would be wild. So like you know, trying to be an asshole in a new way. Um yeah, so basically like that could happen, but I also just think that like this will come to a head one way or the other. So what's going to happen is the conservative states are probably going to draw some pretty firm lines that people aren't going to go over. And then the blue states, I think they'll be able to articulate what I said, where the purpose of a well-regulated militia necessary to be in the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. You can fulfill the Second Amendment while still achieving state-level assault weapons bans and hyper-regulation of firearms. And I think that in progressive blue states, just because it's a part of the culture, they won't want firearms as much. So then you'll see a trend decrease as the culture evolves.
Okay, interesting, very good. That was just about everything I wanted to ask you. I do appreciate you taking the time.
My pleasure.
Nearly about an hour and a half. Is there anything you might wanna leave us with? Any final words?
Yeah, so if you're into this stuff or whatever, if you're into my weird centrist fascist drawn and quarter mass shooters, but also, you know, love the gays and the blacks and the Jews and all that kind of stuff, if you like that kind of stuff, then you can check out Counterpoints. I have a Warhammer 40,000 channel where I review and break down the wild and violent and beautiful world of Warhammer 40K. So you can check that out. And then linked in there, I have an essay channel and a debate channel. So if you're into politically autistic people screaming at each other about politics, you can check out the debate channel. And then if you liked some of my 3-minute rants, where you know you ask me one question and then I take it for a whole wild roller coaster ride, if you like that, then check out the essay channel and you'll get a vibe for what I'm all about.
Okay, good stuff. Again, thanks very much, man. I enjoyed it greatly. Now, thanks for sharing all your knowledge with us.